I am starting a recording. I'm so excited to have you all here. I see folks trickling in to the webinar, started right on time at 11. I am just so excited to be here. For those of you who are not familiar, we are Kids Mental Health Pierce County. This is a Kids Mental Health Pierce County webinar. We're a community coalition of agencies and providers looking at supporting and streamlining behavioral health resources, education, access, and just support in general for youth and families here in our community. And I cannot be more excited today. I was sharing with the team, Imagine Justice Project team that are here with Caitlin, Carolyn, Malik, and Shannon, that I have needed some hope and support and some goodness in the world right now. And this is a team filled with lots of ideas and hope and hard work in our community. And I think that from all of our different agencies and worlds and just personal views, we've witnessed a lot of impact from the youth violence in our community. And I'm just really hopeful that we can come together, listen to this, learn and gain things from one another. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin and the team to introduce themselves and for us to have this opportunity to learn together. So welcome everyone, and take it away, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. We're really excited to be here today. With me from the team at Peace Point, we have Shannon Shea from Tacoma Boat Builders, Malik Banks, community member and one of our members of Imagine Justice AmeriCorps team, and Carolyn Allen from New York, also one of the members of our Imagine Justice AmeriCorps team. And I am going to share my screen. Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do today is present about Peace Point, the More Than Numbers campaign to change the way Pierce County understands and responds to youth violence. Excuse me. On the agenda today, we're going to be talking specifically about the Peace Point report and the research leading up to that, and what our key findings have been, and the Peace Point movement moving forward. The Peace Point is a collaborative initiative. So we had a core planning team of about 20 people. You can see those folks here representing a variety of community partner organizations, a few community institutions, and a strong focus on members of the planning team being individuals who have lived experience with youth violence, other forms of violence, and individuals from communities that are disproportionately impacted by violence. That idea of centering people who have been most impacted by violence and trying to do a project around understanding and responding to youth violence has been a really core value that you'll see come through at multiple places in our presentation and in our work. Outside of the planning team, our organization, the Imagine Justice Project, our partner organization, Tacoma Boat Builders, and the Big Homie program, the three of us sort of led the backbone work of the Peace Point report, doing a lot of the planning and coordination and steering the project moving forward. Within the planning team, we also had a youth core team that met with the larger planning team and on its own, separate from the larger planning team, to have that youth affinity space, which is another strategy we use to make sure that we're really centering the people who are most impacted by community plan to reduce youth violence. So what we did is we started off in October of 2022, and we conducted qualitative and quantitative research. We primarily focused on qualitative research, and again, with individuals in our community directly impacted and disproportionately impacted by violence. We completed 50 structured interviews across Pierce County, and then we supplemented that with 43 conversational interviews, because we found that when we really wanted to dig deep with people and reach people who often wouldn't participate in formal research studies, that conversational style was really important. So I think personally, that's where we learned some of the most and best information. We also conducted 13 focus groups with youth and young adults. and attended 29 listen and learn meetings where we weren't necessarily playing a strong facilitator role, but we're still learning from community about their experiences with youth violence. Throughout the process, we used an emergent approach, which means rather than predetermining where we were going and what our report was going to look like, we learned along the way. We changed directions based on what we learned from community. And what we came up with after our research, we published into the Peace Point report. And what our report is a reference point of community needs, wants, and priorities. And it's a call to action for Pierce County providers, funders, and decision makers. It's not meant to sit on a shelf. And it also is not a detailed plan of hitting these objectives by these dates, right? It's a reference point and a call to action. And there will be a QR code coming along a little later in the presentation for anyone who really wants to dive deep into that full report. The report itself talks about what are the root causes of youth violence here in our community and what should we be doing about it. What our key finding is that at the root, youth violence here in Pierce County is a manifestation of interconnected and intergenerational cycles of trauma, oppression, and poverty. Alongside those three core root causes, we have other significant driving factors of mental health, hopelessness, social media, and access to firearms. And here I'm going to take a little bit of a pause and turn it over to one of our other panelists, Malik Banks, who can speak a little bit more to what that looks like on the ground.
Mhm. Okay, how you guys doing, everybody? I hope everybody's well. Like Kayla has expressed, my name is Malik Banks, and I feel honored to speak in front of all of you guys because first and foremost, I've experienced these different like oppression, poverty, trauma. I experienced all three of them. So like when I speak from a place where it's like I've seen the impact, but I also been impacted by it as well. So these three core problems that are basically where everything stems from when it comes to violence and when it comes to just being a young person that struggles with so many barriers and so many things that they have to overcome at an early age. And as you guys can imagine, and as you guys know, when you really think about violence, these are all the things that stem from it. These are all the things that cause violence to happen. And these are all the things that happen after violence has been taking place in somebody's life. So, yeah. And next slide.
So I know a lot of you probably attended this webinar with your pen and paper, and you're like, all right, this is a huge problem in our community. Tell me what I can do. Let me walk out of here with clear action steps on what I'm going to do to fix youth violence. We do have some tactical, actionable information coming. But before we get there, I really want to emphasize that one of the most profound things that we learned through the plan is that how we go about addressing youth violence and how we do our everyday work is just as important, if not more important, than what that work actually is. So I really want to emphasize, if you take away anything from this presentation, this is the slide, right? We need to be making sure that the strategies that we're using to address the symptoms, right? The symptom being youth violence, is not actually exacerbating the root causes of trauma, oppression, and poverty. So we must be trauma informed and resiliency centered. And that does not mean I send my staff, everybody goes to one trauma informed training and then we check the box and then cool, we're done, we're trauma informed. It really means practicing that. You're never done, the box is never checked. Similarly, anti-racist work within your organization and your life as an individual. What are you doing every day to examine your policies and your processes and continue to work towards anti-racism? We also need to uplift many different service providers and providing many different services. I've recently learned this metaphor of the Swiss cheese approach. So if you think about there being a problem and you respond with an intervention, that intervention is a piece of Swiss cheese. It's got little holes in it. We're never going to have a uh, perfect solution. Rather, it's about stacking as many layers of Swiss cheese as we possibly can to create the most support for young people and their families so that we're minimizing the gaps and weaknesses of all the different solutions. We also need to make sure that when we're talking about youth violence, we're thinking about services to youth and their families. And that translates really importantly, I think, to funding. A lot of funding for youth violence is really narrowly focused on youth, but we need to be including families in that conversation and in that service delivery model. And we need to be partnering with them as experts in designing what those solutions and services should be. And then lastly, we have a pretty big section in the report around funder practice accountability, around things that funders can do to better support the long-term sustainability and efficacy of nonprofits and other individuals and community working to address youth violence. And Malik, I know you were chiming in a little bit there. Is there anything more you wanted to say here?
Yeah, I think the other thing that's very important too, outside of correcting our facilities or our infrastructures, I think it's also important to work on ourselves too. Like, how do you go about daily life? How do you look at your coworker? Do you look at your coworker as the problem, or are you looking at those three key things as the problem? And those are the things that we're trying to overcome. You know, and are you building trust? Are you genuinely showing love? Because like doing the work only gets you so far. And you only gonna go as far as you're willing to grow. So if you're not willing to grow into a great person, you can only speak and do so much great works before you get burnt out, or it's like, okay, now it's a reality check. So yeah.
Right. I think a good way to think about it is often we think about how can we fix youth and families, right? Because that's the problem. If young people are engaged in this violence, the problem is youth and families. And I think what we've learned through Peace Point is that we do need to support youth and families, but really what needs fixing is ourselves and our own systems, right? So turning that work back onto ourselves. So for those of you with your pen and paper looking for that actionable section, this is it. We identified 4 priority areas for action, and these 4 priorities actually came directly from those 13 focus groups we had with youth and young adults. And then they were kind of synthesized and refined by the larger planning team. These 4 topics or 4 priorities for action are pretty broad and pretty high level. So we're going to talk about what each one means and give some examples of each one. And I encourage you to, when you review the plan and think back to this webinar, in the new year, as you're thinking about your own organization or your own work in community and what you can do to help reduce youth violence. These are guideline areas, but it's really up to each of you to think about what section of these priorities can intersect with your own work and how you can really integrate them into your own strategic plans. So the first section is improved communication, coordination, and collaboration across service providers. You want to tell us a little bit about that one, Malik?
Could you say that last part again?
You want to tell us a little bit about the first priority for action?
First one, improve communication, coordination, and collaboration across service providers. Basically, in a nutshell, it's like, how can we get anywhere if we're not communicating, coordinating, and collaborating? And this also supports what we were saying about digging within yourself and making them changes within yourself. Because it's like, how is your communication with the ones you love? How is your communication with the people that live with you? Do you have a roommate that you don't talk to, but you guys need to talk because you got to pay the bills? Like, this is that type of thing. Like, everybody needs your guys' services, needs our services. So we as the people have to be able to provide that to the people, because by doing the work, which is communicating with each other, letting go of the egos and all the stuff that's getting in the way of us being able to help make a better tomorrow for our community and actually do those three things: communication, coordination, collaboration. So yeah.
Thank you. And sorry, just a quick technical note. Vanessa, I don't know if you can help, but Malik says the Zoom won't let him turn his video back on. If you could please look into that, that'd be great. Thank you. Yeah, so some specific examples of things that could be done in this area, some ideas that came out of our talks with community partners and with youth and young adults. One idea is to hire violence prevention coordinators that could serve at different organizations, but then come together as a cohort of violence prevention coordinators to help connect the work of multiple different organizations. And then also, there's a lot of discussion in the report about the role that the funding structure and the funding system plays with perpetuating these gaps and duplication of services across providers. And so some ideas that have come up are things that funders can do differently to better incentivize their grantees to participate in coordination and collaboration. So there's some specific ideas around that as well. You want to talk about the second one, Malik?
Absolutely. When I think about this, I think about like I was working on Tuesday. I was working at Oakland High School, and one of the security guards tried to dismiss me because I was doing my job, but I wasn't on the clock, so I was doing like overtime work because I really genuinely care about the young people. So I seen a whole bunch of young people in the hallway just sitting there. They weren't going to class. They didn't have no emphasis about joining the class anytime soon. They had their headphones in, and I talked to them like, "How come you guys are not going to class?" They was like, all of them said, "My teacher kicked me out of class." And it's like, in that, what did they learn? What did they gain? Like, why are we excluding people because they're bad kids or they're doing stuff that's bad, when that should be a moment for you to embrace them, because it's a cry for help when you act out a term. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that schools, teachers, parents, and students have been and continue to be working really hard to create an environment at schools that are safe and respectful and really foster a sense of belonging. And still, when we go and talk with young people, they're still telling us as adults that we have a lot more work to do in this area. The impact on how adults treat young people at school, how they talk to them at school, and some of the policies around dress code and behavior and expectations can inadvertently make young people feel, you know, not wanted, not respected, like they don't belong. And so this was, I think, probably the most prevalent area of discussion with the young people in our focus groups. And like I said, there's a lot of work being done here. And I also want to call out that when we were having those focus groups with young people, they specifically named the reality that it's not like teachers are not doing their best or teachers don't want young people to succeed. Like teachers are trying really, really hard. It's not blaming teachers or blaming schools or anything like that. Our young people even pointed back upstream to the funding system and recognizing that teachers are really often overpaid or underpaid and overworked, and that's leading to some of the exhaustion and the burnout that's playing into this situation. So young people really understand the complexity of the issues, and it's not just complaining or blaming, but really calling out to us as adults that we have a lot more work to do in this area. And some specific ideas that have surfaced around this is to do some organizing of parent coalitions to shift the power dynamic a little bit around schools and families, possibly convening a think tank or uplifting discussions that are already happening around how we can fix the problem in the school funding formula. Engaging with parents and their families and evaluating school policies and practices so that schools can learn more from students and families about where their opportunities for improvement are, and then exploring some additional pathways to bring even more caring adults into schools. How about that third one, Malik?
Uh, I really like this one for sure. Like, I think the barriers that stop the youth or the young people from being able to have access to anything as far as resources to better their situation, that's a very like at home one. That because it often stems from like a single parent household. Like we could name three things off the top of the head that you need to show up to work. It's like if a young person can't do that because first of all they're not an adult, so they can't go get a driver's license, get a job to fund their car, buy a car, you know. And a lot of the times they don't even know where to go to get an Orca card because they haven't been told where to go, or you know the principal's so busy, and you know there's a lot of stuff that stem from it. But any way, shape, or form we could break down the access barriers, because they have to have access to anything we want to provide for them in order for them to even start to take the medicine of whatever we feel like the cure is to the problems, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a good way to think about this priority for action is that if you're not partnering with youth and families or partnering with the people who are receiving your services or trying to receive your services, there's no way that you fully understand what barriers exist. You must be partnering with people who are trying to access your services to really understand what that experience is like of them trying to access your services so that you can identify the barriers and then start trying to reduce them. Another big aspect of this priority that Malik referenced is transportation. So that is kind of a bell that's been rung a lot in our community. Transportation is a major barrier. And what we highlight in our report is that there's not one solution to transportation, but it's really focusing on a multi-pronged approach where we are increasing, public transportation routes and service times, but we're also reducing the need for transportation by bringing more programs and services out into neighborhoods so that youth and family don't have to be traveling to get to them anyways. And then I also want to highlight here, probably if we were to tally like the number one tangible strategy that young people came up with to reduce youth violence, probably the number one most popular thing that we heard is that young people really want to see a return of free driver's education classes in their schools. Young people feel like the barriers for them to access uh, programs and services and jobs and family and all sorts of meaningful things in their life is transportation. And it's not just about getting that free bus pass, which is great. That's a huge accomplishment for our community. All youth ride for free, but it's not enough, right? And a lot of young people are looking for that autonomy of being able to drive. And so that's something we can work together as a community to address. All right, last one, Malik, what you think?
This is my favorite because I believe that everybody has a inner child, if you would. And like I have a son now, he's a little over 1 years old, about to be two. And I feel like the most therapeutic thing that I have done for him that's so harmless is just set up some barriers, give him like a whole room, the whole living room, or just his own space where he could just run around where there's just toys and things for him to do. But I don't have to necessarily tell him like pick that toy up, go do this, go do that. He's just running around just being free. Because at the end of the day, all young people come with their own sense of creativity and imagination. So if you just let get that pressure off of them because they're told what to do like 24 hours of the day, like school, they're told what to do. They're probably telling themselves what to do in their dream because they can't even focus on anything but being told what to do. If you just provide them safe spaces and just house like a safe, positive place to be, you know, set the tone, set the environment, set the vibe, and just allow them to just mingle amongst each other. I feel like there'll be some mentoring that goes peer to peer within that infrastructure as well, you know? So yeah.
Malik, I love that you connected that to the experience of your 1 year old son. As you know, I also have a 1 year old son. And when it comes to early childhood education and that like birth to 3, birth to 5, this idea of play is so centered, right? Like we know that young children learn through play, but as we get older, the programs for young people become more and more structured, and sometimes we lose sight a little bit of that play. And also, play looks a lot different when you're 16 than when you're 6. And I also want to emphasize that we do need structured programs with curriculum and uh, behavior rules, right? Like Tacoma and Pierce County, we have a huge number of positive youth development programs, mentoring programs, and all sorts of really high quality, effective programs for young people. We need to sustain those, support them. It's not that those programs are doing anything wrong or off the mark. We need those and we need to uplift those. And we also need to complement that with those safe, unstructured, free spaces where young people can just show up and be themselves and not have to fill out registration forms and not have to play your little icebreaker games, right? They just want to be on their phones and hang out with their friends, and they want to do that somewhere that's safe. Um, so that's what we've really heard from talking with community there. And I have some specific examples again, also in the report around what that really looks like. But some examples are, meeting young people where they're at by exploring more digital and virtual program offerings. Again, partnering with youth and families instead of, oh my gosh, I'm the worst at this. No matter how many times I feel like I've learned this lesson, it still happens to me like a few times a month. I find myself trying to guess what young people want instead of just going and asking young people what they want. And if you don't have the relationships with the young people to go and ask them, find someone who does, because there's lots of folks in community like Malik and others who can help bridge that gap so that we're not over here guessing or trying really, really, really hard to sell our programs and our ideas to young people, but we're just asking them what they want and then using our resources to make that happen. And there's a lot of other examples here as well. Part of the reason I think this doesn't happen as much is that providing unstructured space is not as fundable in a lot of our current funding climate. So that's something funders can do different, is really prioritize driving funding to that. Focusing on spaces specifically for the formerly incarcerated or justice involved youth is really important here. And what does it look like to create a safe and inviting space for that demographic compared to other youth is really important. And then doing more partnerships across organizations so that we can bring more of those programs into neighborhoods where young people are. Okay, we're going to move on to who should do this work. And what we've got here is a mirror. That means you. You should be doing this work. Also, what we have is a window because you shouldn't be doing this work alone, right? So think about how you in your role can help move forward this framework for youth violence prevention, but also think about who in your community, youth and families first, but also other service providers, elected officials, like who else should be involved in this work. And that's the way that the Peace Point report is set up. It's, like I said earlier, it's designed to be a reference point and a call to action. So we intentionally did not create a report that says, here's what Peace Point is going to do. Rather, what we're hoping to really cultivate is a movement where everyone is integrating some of these concepts and values and approaches into the work they do. So at high level institutions and at grassroots organizations and even folks who might not be part of organizations. This is something where everyone can play a role. You want to add anything, Malik?
Yeah, so all hands on deck, all aboard, like Noah's Ark, everybody can do the work, and just like that window, if you look outside and you see something that, you could possibly do to make the world a little better, whether it's picking up some trash, breaking up two young people having a discrepancy, or, you know, just going outside and greeting your neighbor. Because even in that, like, I don't like my grandma, she always tells me how the neighbors always give her this nasty look when she goes outside. She doesn't even know the neighbor's name. And like when I was growing up as a kid, I seen a lot of the time the neighbors used to parent each other's kids. Like, oh, you seen Malik down the street doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. They'll bring me back home, tell my mom what I was doing, and it'll be like just a safer place and safer environment for the whole community. And I also seen neighborhood watches. That was them people that kept the neighborhood safe too. And it was like voluntary work. Like I don't know any neighborhood watches that got paid. They just did it out of the kindness of their heart. Like we all want to have a safe place to go, a nice place, nice warm place to go, whether it's inside our house or outside in the world, you know. And any place that feels like home is home. So I feel like we should just keep continuing to create the world in a better place and create the world for it to feel like home for all of us. And it's not about just you, because once you put it in a way where it's like it's not happening to me, so why should I have to do it? Then you're forcing the world to make it happen to somebody that's close to you or somebody that it's gonna hit home. And once that happened, then it's like, okay, now I'm gonna do the work because it happened to me. And let's just not hope for that. Let's not wait for that to happen. Let's just do the work, you know? So yeah.
Thanks, Malik. So we published our report, the Peace Point team published a report in June of 2023. So it's been kind of a whirlwind. We started our research in October of 2022. 9-ish months later, we published our findings in the report. And since that time, we've been focusing a lot on community outreach and education. And a lot of this is based on the understanding that we have an obligation to share what we've learned and uplift the voices of people who have been directly impacted um, by violence, to share their voice and the energy that they shared with us through our research. We have an obligation to make sure that doesn't just sit on a shelf and next year another group comes back and does the same thing, right? That's not to say there's not more learning to do, because there's an endless amount of learning that we can and should be doing. But it's our responsibility to make sure we're not stuck in an endless loop of learning, right? We've got to, at some point, be translating this into action. So a lot of what we've been doing is outreach and education focused on building a shared understanding of the root causes of youth violence, with the belief that only when we have a shared understanding of the problem can we really be effective and uniting around a solution to that problem. So something that's been really exciting that we've been able to do in partnership with Pierce County is we've given out 22 mini grants to small organizations to help us spread the word of Peace Point and share the findings of Peace Point through their communities. We also welcome Malik and Carolyn, as well as our third AmeriCorps member, Sai. They've been serving in AmeriCorps volunteer, national service volunteer positions to help us do that community outreach and education, especially around engaging youth and young adults across Pierce County. We've done tons and tons and tons of community presentations and individual meetings, and we are also engaged in organizing some storytelling workshops with some local experts in storytelling so that we can help young people think about what their story is and then communicate that in a public setting in a way that's both compelling and maintains their own physical and psychological safety. And part of that idea is, again, to help center the voices of people who are most impacted by youth violence and build that shared understanding of youth violence through stories, which goes back to kind of our tagline that I shared on the very first slide, Peace Point, more than numbers. A lot of our work is designed to supplement the important quantitative work that looks at these like population level indicators of violence. We want to remind people that people are people. We're more than just numbers, and we can't really understand what's happening in our community if we're only looking at numbers. We need to be centering relationships with people and people most impacted by these issues if we really want to make meaningful long-term change that impacts them. Malik, you want to say anything here?
Yeah. Okay, so as far as outreach, I'm gonna break this down too. So as far as outreach, I know me personally, I have been very impacted by the relationships and the people that I've came across by attending and trusting in Caitlin's amazing way of finding things for us to do, because at the beginning of this, it was kind of like, as all you guys know, like nonprofit work is like hit or miss. It's never like constantly smooth, like working at a warehouse or working at a job where it's a business compared to a nonprofit. But yeah, I personally spoke at Mount Tahoma High School in front of some teachers that have mentored me along the way and have took it outside of the schoolhouse. I also have been impacted by meeting personal people that have came from different states and came here, and I met them at, like, every time we present, there's always somebody that's like, I like what you said. And then I get their number, and then we talk outside of the meeting, and we just talk one on one, and we talk about what they got going on, how I can impact them. Because like I'm very much so a doer. Like when it comes to young people, there's not any amount of money that you could or can't pay me that's gonna make me want to do it more or do it less. It's just the resources help implement that, and it help like take that to the next level. But it's just like something that's in us. Like for me personally, I look at a young person, I'm just like, how can I make his, his outfit a little better, or how can I comb his hair to the side a little so it just adds that little sprinkle in his eye, or their eye, and even a storytelling workshop, like the first one we did with Threat, which is one of my mentors in this community work. He was just basically telling us to make up a story where we're lying, and the person knows that we're lying, and we still have to convince them that we're telling the truth, and we can't put no truth in the story. And it's like those little things that make you laugh a little more, that make you just enjoy life a little better, even if it's sometimes corny or we laugh at each other through humility and growth. It's still like heart touching, it's still healing to a certain degree, because the fact that I'm able to laugh at someone that looks different than me when I used to be scared of that because of oppression or the negative thoughts that were thrown into my head as a kid, it's like real miracle working and real magical for me to be able to sit with my colleagues and laugh and really talk about. Remember that one time when you were stuttering because you were trying to lie, but I knew you was lying? It's just them good moments that really make this community work worth it, and we're all on the same team. Like, we definitely didn't come here to try and tell you guys what to do or say what you guys are doing is wrong. We're just here to connect, honestly, and see how we can both fit into the same bracket and do the work and help amplify and grow each other's garden, if you will. So yeah.
For sure. And that's a good segue into what you can do to get involved, and how to join the movement. So this QR code here, you can scan it, or you can also visit the website at peacepointpc.org. You can sign up for our mailing list and just connect with us that way. We would love to come and present to your organizations, your teams, or communities, just to help, again, share the knowledge that's been gifted to us from community members and make sure that we are really good stewards of that gift and that we're aligning our understanding of the problem so that we can really rally together around the solution. We also have, from those presentations and from the outreach that we've been doing, we've started doing some kind of informal, unpaid consultative partnerships with organizations and institutions who are really energized around this and really want to think about how they can change the way they're approaching their work to better interrupt those interconnected and intergenerational cycles of trauma, oppression, and poverty that are leading to youth violence. So we'd love to talk with you more about that and engage in kind of ongoing relationship as you work towards your own specific goals. And then help us tell our story. We do have some conversation cards, which you can request from us, or you can find at a lot of our community partner organizations, places of business. And it's talking points that are designed to be used like around the dinner table or, on the bus or what have you, where you're just having those casual conversations with folks. and it's some talking points that help kind of center the conversation around youth violence in what we know to be true around the root causes and successful interventions and prevention strategies for youth violence. And then again, I said this before, I think one of the main things we hope you take away from this presentation is that, yes, it does matter what you're doing, but the real opportunity is to examine how you're doing this work and really lean into what Malik was saying earlier, like if you're an organization and you're trying to do anti-violence work, but you're treating people on your staff with violence, emotional violence and bullying, like you're not really helping us interrupt those intergenerational cycles, because that staff person is probably someone else's parent, and now they go home and that changes how they're interacting with their kids. So it's really all connected. And we really need to be thinking about how the ways that we approach this work can really lead to whether or not our strategies are being successful. And then related to that, it's not really about fixing kids and families. It's about fixing our systems and our structures as adults, as organizations, as institutions. So we hope that you leave this presentation informed, but also inspired and curious about what you can do in your role to help really make a long-term, meaningful impact in our community, so that when we see the cycle come back around and we see these young people who are teenagers now, when we see them coming back as parents, we see their children really thriving in a community that is safe, where they have a strong sense of belonging and lots of opportunity and less youth violence. Malik, you got anything you want to add? You gonna take it home, wrap it up?
Yeah, beautiful people all across the world, everywhere you may be. Uh, I just want to thank you guys for listening to our story, listening to our presentation, and giving us that moment to express how we feel. I also want to say the movement is something that you should take and live with, because there's a difference between a movement and a job description. And in this movement, we all put our arms out, we gather together, and we take this at home in the places wherever we may be. Like, it's never a problem, or it's never too complicated to just go do something that'll make somebody else feel good and feel like they're wanted on this earth, because all them problems and all them situations are real, and you never know what somebody's going through. So just continue to be the stand-up people that you guys are, to make this a better place. And yeah, I truly appreciate you guys for sure.
Well said. Thank you, Malik. Well, we're going to move into some question and answer. So there should be a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to propose any questions to myself or Malik. And then we also have two other folks from our team on the call today, Shannon Shea from Tacoma Boat Builders and Carolyn Allen from the Imagine Justice AmeriCorps team, who can help us field questions as well. And while we wait for any questions to come in, maybe Malik, you could get us started by just sharing a little bit more about your experience as a youth and a young adult in Tacoma Pierce County.
Okay, so boom. I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna be real, like I've been this whole presentation, but and I don't want to alarm anybody or blame anybody, because as we discussed earlier, it's the systems, it's not really us as people. But it becomes us as people when we decide to take the systems and like bad habits and just continue to do them, knowing that it's not right. But for me, growing up in Pierce County, at first it was really rugged. My mom raised 6 kids, 5 boys and 1 girl, and there's a very big disconnect when it comes to women raising boys to become men, because as a boy, you just instantly just see, like, you see weaknesses, you see differences, you see things that make you guys completely opposite. And it's just like one of them things, just like, I'm supposed to try to be like you and listen to what you're saying and go about life in the way that you present it to me. But we're two different people. Like, most women aren't aggressive, like, naturally. They don't just come off as aggressive. They come off as loving, compassionate, empathy people, So, like, in that, I seen a lot of violence. I seen a lot of peer pressure from gangs outside of my household when I was just walking to the corner store or going to play at the park. You know, I had to go through a lot of stuff where it was like I'm trying to play at the park with my brother and sister, but I gotta tell them to go home early because the neighborhood bullies or neighborhood gang members were trying to fight us and harm us in different various ways. And but on the flip side of that, because that happened until I was like 16 years old, and then when I was 16, I started seeing a little brighter side of Tacoma. Like I started bumping into community activists, and they were just telling me like, Malik, you got so much potential, and they just start shining that light on me, even though I really couldn't see any light. And that's what draws me in. Like that's what made me the person that I was because like I had this hospital experience that uh it just left me hospitalized because I got into a fight with a young man that said he was gonna kill me throughout the school. And when I got into a fight with him, he had a weapon in his hand, but it left me hospitalized. And in that, that's when it was like more than just let me go talk to some kids. Let me say these cool little things and not really have to do the work within myself. But I felt conflicted in that moment, and it made me like, okay, so if I'm doing this and I'm seeing that my little brother's doing it, I'm seeing that my little sister's doing it, then it's more than just let me just change for me to be a better person. It's like, no, now we're talking about inspiration, inspiring people. Now we're talking about impact on somebody's life. Like until they wake up because their kids from following you and going down that path of destruction and having felonies and being hurt and harmed, you should automatically admit that this is not right. And in admitting that it's not right and this is not the way anymore, that doesn't mean that you have to be perfect because nobody's never going to know 100% of all the answers to all the questions. So it's like in that moment, it became like a mentor, like a therapeutic mentorship because I never shut my little brother up when he's talking to me. Like just because he's 5 years younger than me doesn't mean that he can't teach me something. And I feel like if we take that approach in life, where we sometimes we could be the teacher because some people do come to us and they come to us for advice. But other times you could be the carrier of the problems that they're expressing to you. And then there's some other times that people really don't like to go through or really experience, especially the old school people like that were raised in an old school household, like my mom. She doesn't really like to listen to the advice that I give her because she feels like since she's older, she should be the one giving the advice and I should be the one listening. But it's like, wait a minute. What if what you're saying to me has helped me unlock something that you were never able to see because it's from a different perspective? And it's like those are the things that kept me grounded. And like my mentor told me in San Francisco, shout out to Dr. Marshall, he said, Malik, even after you feel like you're healed, still stay in therapy. And I'm like, what does that really mean? And it's like, you know, it's like if we look at violence as a drug that we're all addicted to or we all been injected with, like COVID, for instance, we all been impacted by COVID. And then we take that, okay, we all been injected by this in some way, form, or fashion. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're violent, but it means that we have to go to the doctor and get looked at because nobody wants to accidentally have a crisis come up from some violence that you never went to go tend to. So if you look at it from that perspective, okay, now you get your medicine, you take your medicine, but continue to take your medicine because you never know what trauma you may face, what PTSD, what inner child things that have impacted you that you just never opened up. I feel like we just once you take that band-aid off, even though it's gonna hurt when you first reveal it and it's gonna feel like it's not like something that is like fan favorite to do, but it's like why are you doing this? What are you doing this for? And I do it because the ones I mentor, when they give me them excuses, when they give me those, but it's complicated, it's frustrating. I'm like, I understand I did it first. So since I did it, follow me to learn how to do it for yourself. And that's teaching a young person how to fish compared to fishing for them. So yeah.
Hell yeah, Malik. Hell yeah. We gotta have healing to interrupt those cycles. Yeah, and it's hard to help drive healing work in community when we're not healing ourselves. Yeah. Well, we haven't had any other questions come up yet. Carolyn or Shannon, is there anything you wanted to add? Or Vanessa, did you want to chime in? I saw you turn your camera on.
I just turned my camera on to celebrate this presentation. Malik and Caitlin, so much shared community and shared information. And as Kids Mental Health Pierce County, some of the core values of going to where young people are, connecting and participating and being there in the communities and shared space is just really special and really exciting to practice the work. We're practicing the work. We're doing those things. We're changing those systems by becoming a community, by being involved in Kids Mental Health Pierce County Coalition, by connecting with Peace Point, by being in the schools and the spaces. And so I'm just really proud, and it gives me a lot of hope that we all are doing these things and taking the steps, but a reminder that the importance of community, the importance of the collaboration, that it's not just going to be one agency, one provider, one person to make the impact. It's going to be all of us together to keep our young people safe and supported and well. So I just wanted to kudos and gratitude, so much gratitude. And Carolyn, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate that absolutely. I think there's a lot of great work happening in this community right now around youth violence and changing these systems. So like that's good and we should celebrate that. But I also would challenge people who are thinking to themselves, like, well, I'm already doing this work, maybe feeling a little defensive, like, we're doing what we can. Absolutely. But I think the importance of the Peace Point report and all of that is to show that, we should all be continually reevaluating ourselves, our work, our organization, and seeing, all right, what's the next step? How can we improve even more to help young people even more than we already are? It's continual in everything that we're doing. And I also want to speak a little bit about my experience with Peace Point. So I'm from New York. I just moved here in August for this AmeriCorps role. And I come from an academic background. I just graduated with my bachelor's degree in political science and peace and justice studies. So I have that very like theoretical, like, I've read all the theories and all of the academic stuff on that, but I really felt like I was kind of missing that real world experience and that connection between the theories and then what's actually happening and what people are experiencing. So I think that's how Peace Point has been really valuable to me. I mean, me and Malik come from very different, life experiences, but he's always teaching me things. So I think like surrounding yourself with people who are different from you or who have different perspectives is so valuable because you don't know what you don't know until you learn it. So that's really important. But a lot of that comes from those high trust relationships that we talked about, which is why I think high trust relationships and building those relationships with youth, with families, with other service providers is so important. We talk a lot about how service providers or people working with youth often like get siloed, find themselves kind of like isolated in their work. But the reality is there's a lot of people working with youth and families in this community. And that's why that increased communication is so important because we can all support each other and learn things from each other, but we can't do that if we're not talking and having those high trust relationships. So just as a quick example, Caitlin mentioned how we gave out I think 22 small grants to organizations in Pierce County that are doing direct service work with youth. And, I read through their outreach plans. I like read about what work they do. And, I thought I had a pretty good understanding, but me and Caitlin ended up driving out to the Key Peninsula to visit in person one of the youth centers that we were giving a grant to. And it was just such a cool experience to like go somewhere I've never been, meet people I've never met, and like actually seeing it in person and being there and hearing it from the people that are doing that work had such a better understanding of what they do, of the kids that they serve. So actually going in person, like investing time and effort into those relationships with people doing this work, I think can be so valuable. So that's kind of my experience.
Thank you so much. I know we only have 5 minutes left, and I feel compelled to add one more point, which is there's a lot of sense of urgency right now in our community with young people um, losing their lives and being harmed by violence. And that is a huge problem that deserves to have all the attention that it's getting. But I also just want to throw a word of caution that, a sense of urgency is like a classic characteristic of a white supremacist culture where we're hugely focused on solutions and we have a sense of urgency all the time. So I just want to caution all of us as a community as we're thinking about what can we do to end youth violence tomorrow? Like, what can we do to prevent one more young person from losing their life? That is really important, and we should continue to have those conversations. But I really challenge us to think about what we can do to make sure that these conversations, all the funding that's going into community, all the concern and collaboration that's happening right now when youth violence seems like such a high priority, top of mind incident, what can we do to make sure that those conversations and that funding and that attention continue and don't dry up and we don't then see a resurgence of this again in another cycle, right? So urgency is understandable, but we also need to be thinking about long-term systems and structural change. And it's a complex problem. There is not going to be a complex solution, or there's not going to be a simple solution. Yeah. Anybody from the team want to add any closing thoughts?
Just thank you, everybody. I really believe and have trust and faith in my team. And yeah, let's just build relationships on trust like we continue to do, you know? But yeah.
The way I love that, Malik. That's everything. Relationships are everything, and that is how we build a safer community, build a more supportive community for our people, our families, our young folks, is by working together, working with other organizations, getting to know the young people and connecting in a meaningful way. And I'm so grateful to everyone who's attended, everyone who participates in various aspects of the work. We are always welcoming more support, more information, more questions. So if you have questions for this team, for myself, for community ideas, for additional topics we should be talking about and focusing on for our young people, to support our youth and our families, please reach out to me through the website, kidsmentalhealthpiercecounty.org. I can connect you with this team. And I just want to express my gratitude to you all for being here, for sharing, for being open and vulnerable and really fun. And I'm just very, very grateful. I see lots of hearts, lots of appreciation. And I just really recognize that this is supportive, this is impactful, and we are making differences in our spaces and even more differences as a community coming together. So brings me hope today. I am looking forward to entering the new year with a lot of hope and a lot of connection and collaboration, continued collaboration as an organization, as organizations and as a coalition. Again, reach out with any questions, team, Kids Mental Health Pierce County members, community members. Thank you endlessly for the work that you have done this year, the work you continue to do, and just bringing so much hope and love to the community. We're really grateful. This is a special place and we can continue to grow it. Like Malik said, just takes one small action, one little thing, lots of little things, many little things. If we're all doing them, we can create a bigger safety net, create a safer space. So look forward to additional webinars in the future, newsletters in the future, conversations and relationships in 2024. So thank you, Peace Point team, and thank you, Kids Mental Health Pierce County. Grateful for you all.